He came to the mountains to outrun memories that had the persistence of ghosts. Elias Thorne drove until the pavement gave out, then kept going, his truck's tires chewing at the gravel of an old logging road that climbed into the thinning air of the Cascades. He was a man in his 40s, but the quiet weight he carried made him seem older. His body was a testament to a former life, lean and corded with the kind of muscle forged in crucibles he never spoke of. It was a discipline etched into his posture, the way he moved with an economy that was both graceful and unnervingly still. He wore what amounted to a uniform of self-imposed exile, a faded olive field jacket over a plaid flannel shirt, worn cargo pants, and leather boots that had molded to his feet over thousands of miles of penance. On his wrist, a military-issue watch ticked off a time he no longer felt a part of. The truck could go no further. A fallen hemlock, immense and final, blocked the path. Elias killed the engine, and the silence that rushed in was a physical thing, dense and smelling of pine and damp earth. It was what he had come for. For a long moment he just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, his gaze lost in the deep green gloom of the forest. The past was a relentless noise, a frequency he could not tune out. It was the crackle of a radio, the percussive thump of rotor blades, the shouted name of a man he had failed. Here, the silence was different. It had teeth, but it was honest. Beside him on the passenger seat, Ajax lifted his head. The German shepherd was old, a veteran in his own right. His muzzle was a distinguished silver gray, and his dark, intelligent eyes held a deep, knowing calm. He was not a pet. He was a partner, the last living link to the world Elias had severed himself from. The dog's breathing was a steady, reassuring rhythm in the cab. He did not whine or fidget. He simply watched Elias, his gaze a question that needed no words. He was waiting for the next command, the next objective. It was all he had ever known. "All right, bud," Elias said, the words rough from disuse. He opened the door, and the cold, clean air was a shock to the lungs. He swung his Eberly stock half-track pack from the bed of the truck, the motion fluid and practiced. Every piece of gear had its place, every buckle and strap a purpose. It was a small, self-contained world of order in the chaos of his mind. They walked. They walked away from the road, away from the truck, away from everything that could connect him to the man he used to be. The forest swallowed them whole. The canopy above was a dense weave of fir and cedar, and the light that filtered through was muted and green, like being underwater. The ground was a soft carpet of moss and fallen needles, muffling their steps. Elias moved with the quiet stealth of his training, his eyes scanning, assessing, reading the terrain. Ajax walked at his left heel, his gait steady, his presence a silent conversation. The dog was never entirely off duty. His ears swiveled, capturing sounds Elias missed. His nose sifted the complex tapestry of scents on the air. They made camp near the spine of a ridge that offered a staggering view of the valley below. A sea of clouds filled the basin, churning slowly like a vast, silent ocean. The peaks of other mountains rose from it like dark, jagged islands. Elias worked with methodical precision, his movements stripped of all wasted effort. He didn't pitch a tent, just unrolled a bivy sack and a sleeping bag under the protective overhang of a granite outcrop. He built a small, smokeless fire, a Dakota fire hole that hid the flame and directed the heat. It was a fire for warmth, not for comfort. As the last of the daylight bled from the sky, turning the clouds below to a bruised purple and orange, Elias sat with his back against the cold stone, a tin cup of black coffee warming his hands. Ajax lay a few feet away, not sleeping, but in a state of watchful repose. His head was up, his ears pricked forward. He wasn't looking at Elias or at the fire. He was staring out at a specific point along the cliff face, 100 yards to their right. Elias followed the dog's gaze. He saw nothing but rock and a tangle of wind-stunted pines clinging to the precipice. But he knew the dog's tells. Ajax's breathing had changed. It was shallower, more controlled. His body was rigid, a coiled spring of attention. This was not the posture of a dog watching a squirrel. This was the posture of a sentinel that had detected a threat, or an anomaly, something that did not belong. "What is it, boy?" Elias murmured. Ajax didn't move. His focus was absolute. Elias raised his binoculars, the glass cold against his skin. He scanned the area, rock by rock, tree by tree. He saw the way the wind had sculpted the stone, the hardy resilience of the alpine flora. He saw nothing out of place. Yet the feeling persisted, a low hum of unease transmitted from the dog. Elias trusted the dog more than he trusted his own eyes. Ajax had perceived something that the landscape was trying to hide, a secret held in the stone and the silence. That night, as Elias lay in his sleeping bag, listening to the wind keen over the ridge, the memory he had come here to escape found him anyway. The dust, the heat, the metallic taste of fear. The voice of Ben, young and confident over the comms, just before the line went dead. He turned his face toward the cold rock, the past of physical weight pressing down on him. Beside him, Ajax shifted, letting out a low, soft whine, a sound of shared disquiet in the vast, indifferent dark. The mountain was holding its breath, and Elias felt they had stumbled into the heart of its long-held secret. The morning arrived not with a sunrise, but with a slow, gray diffusion of light through the thick blanket of mist. The world was reduced to a few dozen yards of visibility, the grand vista of the previous evening erased. The air was heavy with moisture that beaded on Elias's jacket and clung to Ajax's fur. The silence was deeper now, muffled by the fog. Elias ate a dry protein bar and drank the last of his cold coffee. He was breaking camp, folding his sleeping bag with crisp, angular movements, when Ajax stood up. The dog did not look at him for a command. He turned and began walking, his purpose clear and undeniable. He moved along the cliff's edge, back toward the spot he had been fixated on the night before. His tail was low, his head down, sniffing the air, reading a story written in scent that was invisible to Elias. "Ajax, heel!" Elias commanded, his voice quiet but firm. The dog paused, glanced back, but did not obey. It was a small act of defiance, so out of character that it sent a fresh spike of unease through Elias. In all their years together, through training exercises and deployments in places where a single mistake was fatal, Ajax had never once broken a command. This was different. This was not disobedience. It was an imperative. Elias slung his pack over his shoulder and followed, his hand resting on the folding knife clipped to his pocket. Ajax led him to a dense, almost impenetrable thicket of old rhododendrons, their thick, waxy leaves slick with mist. The dog pushed his way into the brush without hesitation. Elias followed, the branches scratching at his jacket. A few feet in, Ajax stopped. He began to paw at the ground, a low whine building in his chest. It was a sound of urgent discovery. Elias knelt beside him, pushing aside the damp, mulchy leaves. His fingers brushed against something cold, hard, and impossibly round. It was a wheel. He scraped away more of the earth and debris, his movements becoming more focused. A spoked wheel, its chrome long gone, replaced by a deep, flaking patina of rust. He worked his way back from the wheel, pulling at the thick, gnarled vines that had woven themselves through the object like green ligaments. Slowly, a shape emerged from the earth. A motorcycle. It was an old machine, maybe a Honda or a Kawasaki from the 1970s, its frame so corroded it was the color of dried blood. It was wedged between two granite boulders, upright, as if it had been parked there 40 years ago and simply forgotten. It wasn't the result of a crash. The forks weren't bent, the tank wasn't crushed. It was placed, positioned, hidden. The bike was tilted precariously, its rear wheel hanging over the unseen abyss of the cliff. Elias moved with extreme care, testing the ground, the stability of the machine. The mist swirled around him, creating a sense of dreamlike isolation. It was just him, the dog, and this relic from a forgotten time. Why here? Who would ride a motorcycle to this remote, inaccessible place and just leave it? His eyes fell on a saddlebag. It was made of thick leather, now cracked and stiff as wood, but it had somehow endured. One of the buckles had rusted shut, but the other gave way with a brittle snap. Elias reached inside, his fingers closing around a bundle wrapped in oilskin. The material was still pliable, its greasy texture having repelled the decades of moisture. He carried the bundle back to the relative safety of the rock overhang. Ajax sat beside him, watching intently, a quiet, "I told you so," in his posture. With careful fingers, Elias unwrapped the oilskin. The contents were few, but they resonated with the weight of a life interrupted. There was a silver Zippo lighter, its surface tarnished to a dull pewter gray, a small ring of keys, corroded together into a single, useless sculpture, and a waterproof match container, the kind hikers and soldiers use. He unscrewed the cap, the brass threads grinding. Inside it was perfectly dry. He tipped it over, and two items fell into his palm. The first was a small, tightly rolled piece of paper, held with a brittle rubber band that crumbled at his touch. He unrolled it. It was a map, hand-drawn with an architect's precision on vellum. It wasn't a topographical map of the area, but something else. It showed a series of lines, angles, and reference points labeled with cryptic notes. Witness Point Alpha. Triangulation from true north. Hold to the iron seam. One point was marked with a small, stylized drawing of a motorcycle. Right here. The second item was a single sheet of paper, folded into a neat square. The paper was yellowed, the blue ink of a fountain pen faded but still legible. It was a letter, but it had no salutation. "If this is found," it began, "it means I didn't make it down. It means they were more serious than I thought. Don't let them call it an accident. I brought the proof here, to this place, because it's the only witness that can't be bought or threatened. I did a final survey. The markers are true. They built on a lie, and the mountain knows. I have to make it right. The families of the valley deserve the truth. My only regret is that I won't get to see her again. Tell her I was sorry I had to go." The letter was unsigned. Elias read it again, the words hanging in the cold, misty air. This wasn't a simple disappearance. It was a story of intention, of courage, and of a secret so dangerous its keeper had paid the ultimate price. He looked from the letter to the map, then back toward the rusted motorcycle being slowly reclaimed by the forest. He had come here to be alone, to disconnect. But the past had a way of finding you. Not just your own, but the past of others, buried in the earth, waiting for a catalyst. He looked at Ajax, who rested his graying muzzle on Elias's knee. The dog had not found an object. He had found a responsibility. And now, it was his. The weight of the discovery settled on Elias not as a burden, but as a mission. It was a feeling he hadn't allowed himself to have in years, a cold, clear sense of purpose that cut through the fog of his own grief. He folded the letter and the map, placing them carefully inside a waterproof pocket of his jacket. He looked at the motorcycle one last time, a silent monument to a man named only by his actions. Jay Corbin, Arthur Vance had called him. a ghost with a name. He made a decision. The evidence in the metal box, the tapes, the logs, the deeds, was too important to risk moving without a plan. Sterling would be back, and he wouldn't be polite next time. Elias needed allies. He needed legitimacy. He needed to bring the system, the one he had long since abandoned, to his side. He gave Ajax a quiet command, a hand signal for watch. The dog understood immediately. He settled near the hidden cairn, his body oriented toward the logging road, a silent, living guardian of Corbin's legacy. There was a pact between them, forged in the dust of forgotten war zones and reaffirmed here, on this lonely cliff. Elias would go for help. Ajax would stay and hold the line. The hike down was fast. Elias moved with a ground-eating stride, his mind a whirl of tactical considerations. He was no longer a drifter. He was an operator again, assessing threats, planning routes, anticipating the enemy's moves. The enemy had a name now, Sterling. A man who wore civility like a camouflage, hiding the predator beneath. He reached his truck by midday. The solitude of the mountains gave way to the small, orderly grid of Cascade Forks. The town felt alien. The people moving with a casual slowness that seemed reckless to him. He drove directly to the county clerk's office, a small, unassuming brick building with a flagpole out front. Martha Shaw looked up from a stack of files as he entered. Her glasses were perched on the end of her nose, and her expression was one of mild annoyance at the interruption. She recognized him from the day before. "You again," she said. It wasn't a question. "Find your missing surveyor?" "I found what he left behind," Elias said, his voice low. He placed the waterproof container from the motorcycle on her counter. He didn't show her the tapes or the deeds yet. That was his leverage. He told her the story, stripped of emotion, laying out the facts as he had found them. The motorcycle, the letter, the name Corbin, the connection to the North Cascade Dam project. He told her about Sterling. As he spoke, Martha's expression shifted from skepticism to sharp-eyed focus. She pushed her glasses up properly and leaned forward, her hands clasped on the counter. She was a gatekeeper, yes, but not of secrets. She was a guardian of the record, of the town's official memory. "Robert Sterling," she said, the name tasting like something sour. "His family has been tied to that dam since the beginning. They run the Sterling Foundation now, all about corporate heritage and preserving history. Sounds like they're preserving it with a shovel." She listened, her gaze unwavering, as Elias finished. She was silent for a long moment, her mind clearly working, connecting dots, weighing the implications. "Arthur Vance called me this morning," she said finally. "He was worried. Said you had the look of a man who'd kicked a hornet's nest. He told me more about Corbin. The kid was brilliant, apparently. He did his own geological survey on the sly because he was convinced the company's reports were bogus. He believed the dam was built on an active fault line." The words hung in the air. It wasn't just about stolen land anymore. It was about a catastrophe waiting to happen, a valley full of people living downstream from a ticking clock. "Sterling knows you have the proof," Martha stated. "He won't just let you walk away with it. You can't go back up there alone." "My partner is up there," Elias said. The words came out before he could stop them. The first time he had referred to Ajax that way to a stranger in years. Martha's eyes softened for a fraction of a second. She understood. "We need to do this by the book," she said, her voice all business again. "That makes it harder for men like Sterling to bury. I'll call the county sheriff. And I think we need to get the State Geological Survey Office involved. If Corbin's data is real." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Elias felt a knot in his chest loosen. He had spent so long believing that all systems were corruptible, that all institutions would eventually fail. He had forgotten about the people inside them. People like Martha, who guarded the truth. People like Arthur, who remembered it. He had one more stop to make. He went to a payphone, a relic he was surprised still existed, and dialed a number he hadn't called in 2 years. It rang 4 times, and he was about to hang up when she answered. "Hello?" His sister's voice. Sarah. He didn't know what to say. He had built a wall between them, brick by brick, silence by silence. "Elias?" she asked, a world of hope and hurt in that single word. "Yeah, it's me," he managed. I'm in a town called Cascade Forks, in Washington." "Are you okay?" "I am," he said. And for the first time, he felt it might be true. "I just wanted you to know where I was." It was the closest he could get to an apology, to an invitation, a small crack in the wall he had built.
"Okay, Elias,"
she said softly.
"Okay."
He hung up the phone, the connection severed. But something felt different. He had reported his position. He was no longer a ghost. As dusk began to settle, Elias stood with Martha and a grim-faced sheriff deputy by their vehicles at the base of the logging road. A storm was brewing in the west, the sky taking on the dark, bruised color he had seen from the ridge. The wind was picking up, carrying the scent of rain. "He'll use the storm as cover," Elias said. "He'll assume we'll wait it out." The deputy, a young man with a serious face, looked at the sky doubtfully. "Road's gonna be a mud pit. We could get stuck." "My dog is up there," Elias said simply. It was all the explanation needed. They drove up in the sheriff's 4-wheel drive truck, the headlights cutting a weak swath through the gathering gloom. The wind howled, and the first fat drops of rain began to splatter against the windshield. Elias was a taut bundle of nerves, his focus entirely on the mountain. He was picturing Ajax, alone, holding his ground. The image of Ben's face, surprised and betrayed, flashed in his mind. Not again. He would not fail his partner again. They were halfway up the mountain when the tripwire alarm Elias had set went off in his head. Not a literal alarm, but the instinct that told him they were too late. Sterling was already there. The polite mask would be gone now. The predator would be unleashed. The rain was a deluge by the time they reached the clearing near the cliff. The deputy's headlights illuminated a scene of controlled chaos. Sterling's black SUV was there, its engine running. 2 large men, dressed in black rain gear, were working with shovels and a pry bar at the rock cairn. They had found it. And standing over them, holding a heavy-duty flashlight, was Robert Sterling. His expensive jacket was soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead. The veneer of civility had been washed away, leaving something hard and ugly. At the edge of the light, Ajax was holding them at bay. He wasn't barking or snarling. He was in a low crouch, the fur on his back ridged, a deep, continuous growl rumbling in his chest. He was a barrier of pure, unwavering loyalty. As the sheriff's truck skidded to a halt, everyone froze. The deputy got on the radio, his voice tense. Sterling turned, his face a mask of fury in the flashing blue and red lights that now painted the scene. "This is private property," Sterling yelled over the roar of the wind and rain. "You are trespassing!" "Put down the tools and step away from there," the deputy commanded, his hand on his holstered weapon. For a moment, it was a standoff. Then one of Sterling's men, a bull of a man with a cruel face, made a move toward the half-unearthed box. It happened in a split second. Ajax launched himself forward, a gray blur of fury and teeth. He didn't go for the throat. His training was too deep. He clamped down hard on the man's forearm, a disabling, bone-jarring bite. The man screamed, a sound of shock and pain. The second man, reacting with brute instinct, swung his leg in a vicious kick. It caught Ajax squarely in the side, lifting him off his feet. The dog let out a sharp, piercing yelp and crumpled to the muddy ground. His back leg was bent at an unnatural angle. Time seemed to slow down for Elias. The sound of Ajax's pain cut through him, sharper than any bullet. He saw the dog trying to get up, his hindquarters failing him. He saw Sterling's men going for the box again. He saw the deputy moving to intervene. And he saw Ben. He saw him lying in the dust of Kandahar, his leg mangled, calling for help. He saw himself, the team leader, making the cold calculation. Secure the objective, suppress the enemy fire, recover the man later. The mission first. Always the mission first. It was the right call, the one that got the rest of the team out alive.
It was the call that had haunted his every waking moment since. The box, the evidence, Corbin's legacy, the safety of the valley. That was the mission. He looked at Ajax, struggling in the mud, his dark eyes filled with pain, but still fixed on the men, still trying to do his job. And Elias Thorne made a different call. He broke from the cover of the truck, ignoring the men, ignoring the box, ignoring Sterling and the deputy. He ran straight to his dog. He dropped to his knees in the cold mud and gently gathered Ajax into his arms. The dog whimpered, licking his hand weakly. Elias pulled off his field jacket and wrapped it around the trembling animal, shielding him from the driving rain with his own body. He pressed his face into the dog's wet fur, murmuring quiet, soothing words. "I'm here, bud. I've got you. I'm right here." In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the 40-year-old secret, not the corporate greed, not the impending disaster. There was only his partner, who was hurt because of him, because of a fight he had started. He had made a choice. He had chosen loyalty over the objective. He had chosen the man, the dog, over the mission. He had stayed. Through the roar of the storm, he heard a new voice. "That's enough." Elias looked up. It was the other of Sterling's men, the one who hadn't kicked the dog. He was younger, with a military-style haircut. He was standing between his partner and Elias, his arms out. He looked at Elias cradling the injured dog, and something in his expression had shifted. Respect. Recognition. "He's just protecting his dog," the young man said to his furious partner. "We're done here. This isn't what I signed on for." "Get out of the way," the bull-necked man snarled, shoving him. But the stand had been made. The moral line had been drawn in the mud. Just then, two more sets of headlights appeared, bouncing up the treacherous road. A state park's vehicle and another sheriff's car. Martha had been thorough. The odds had shifted. Sterling saw it. He saw the unraveling of his plan, the arrival of too many witnesses. His face, contorted with rage, suddenly went slack. He gave a sharp, curt nod. His men backed away from the cairn, leaving the metal box half exposed. They retreated to the SUV. As the vehicle sped away, fishtailing in the mud, Elias didn't watch it go. His attention was solely on the precious weight in his arms. He had lost the battle for the box, perhaps. He had failed the mission. But as he looked down at his loyal friend, he felt a profound and unfamiliar sensation. It wasn't victory. It was grace. He had faced the ghost of his past, and this time, he hadn't turned away. The morning after the storm was unnaturally serene. The sky was scrubbed clean, a brilliant, piercing blue. The air smelled of rain-washed earth and pine. The cliffside, however, was a scene of quiet, official activity. Yellow tape cordoned off the area around the motorcycle and the cairn. State investigators in neat jackets were meticulously photographing the site, their voices low and professional. The half-unearthed metal box was now the center of a careful archaeological-style dig. Elias sat by a small, crackling fire a short distance away, the deputy's truck parked nearby as a silent guard. He had spent most of the night right here, refusing to leave. He had used his military first aid kit to clean and splint Ajax's leg as best he could. The dog was resting now, lying on Elias's sleeping bag, his injured leg propped on a rolled-up blanket. He was exhausted but calm, his head resting on his paws, his eyes following Elias's every move. A vet was driving up from a town 2 hours away. Martha Shaw was there, a thermos of coffee in her hand. She poured a cup and handed it to Elias. Her face was etched with concern, but also with a deep, quiet respect. "The state police have issued a warrant for Sterling," she said. "Attempted theft, destruction of a potential historic site, assault. They're throwing the book at him. The younger man he hired, the one who stepped in, his name is Cole. Turns out he's a former Army Ranger. He's giving a full statement. Said he was hired for asset security, not grave robbing and animal cruelty." Elias nodded, sipping the hot coffee. It burned his throat, a welcome grounding sensation. He hadn't won a physical fight. He had simply held his ground on a moral principle, and in doing so, had created a space for others to do the same. Cole's choice had been the turning point. "The first of Corbin's tapes has been reviewed," Martha continued, her voice softer. "It's exactly as you said. He details the falsified geological reports. He names names. The chief engineer, the head of the company. A young, ambitious negotiator named Robert Sterling. The secret was out. It could no longer be buried. The truth J. Corbin had died to protect was finally in the light. Elias felt a sense of profound relief, but it was distant, secondary. His primary focus was on the steady, rhythmic breathing of the dog beside him. He heard a car approaching on the logging road. Not another official vehicle. It was a small sedan, picking its way carefully through the ruts. It parked behind the sheriff's truck. The driver's door opened, and a woman got out. It was Sarah. She stood there for a moment, taking in the scene, the police tape, the investigators, her brother sitting by a fire with an injured dog. She was older than he remembered, her hair threaded with more gray, but her eyes were the same. They held the shared history of their childhood, a language he had long forgotten how to speak. He had called her, but he hadn't expected her to come. He hadn't asked her to. He didn't know how. She walked over slowly, her gaze falling on Ajax.
"Oh, Elias,"
she whispered. She knelt down, not next to him, but next to the dog, her hand hovering just above Ajax's head as if asking permission. Ajax lifted his head and nudged her hand with his nose. Sarah looked at Elias, her eyes shining. "I was so worried. When you called, you sounded different." "I am," he said. It was the simplest, most honest thing he had said in a decade. She didn't press. She didn't ask about the years of silence, the unanswered letters, the pain he had wrapped around himself like a shroud. She just accepted. She stood up and handed him a bag. "I brought you a real breakfast, and a thermos of my terrible coffee, which you always said you liked." A small smile touched Elias's lips, a faint, rusty motion. It was a beginning, a reconnection not forced or demanded but offered, gently. He looked at his reflection in the dark chrome of her thermos, a man with tired eyes and mud on his clothes, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't look away. Later that day,
After the vet had come and gone, confirming a bad fracture that would require surgery but would eventually heal, Elias made a choice. The investigators had offered to transport Ajax down the mountain. Elias had refused. He would carry him. He fashioned a sling from a spare blanket and rope, carefully lifting the 70-pound dog and settling him against his chest. Ajax was a heavy, awkward weight, but Elias adjusted his stance, finding his center of balance. He started the long walk down the mountain, Sarah following a few paces behind, carrying his pack. It was a slow, arduous journey. Every step was a conscious effort. But the weight was real. It was tangible. It was a responsibility he could feel, a loyalty he could demonstrate. It was not the intangible, crushing weight of memory and regret. This was a good weight, an honest weight. As he walked, he felt the ghosts of the past begin to recede, their clamor replaced by the steady rhythm of his own breathing and the warm, living presence against his chest. The story of the North Cascade Dam became a statewide scandal. Jay Corbin was posthumously celebrated as a hero, a whistleblower who had sacrificed everything for the truth. His predictions about the fault line were confirmed by modern geological surveys, prompting an immediate and massive retrofitting project that would cost Sterling's parent corporation billions. It also saved the lives of the thousands of people who lived in the valley below, though they would never know how close they had come to disaster. The land stolen from the original families became the subject of a class action lawsuit. The deeds from Corbin's box were the centerpiece of the case. It would take years, but justice, slow and grinding, was finally moving in the right direction. Elias didn't follow the news closely. He was focused on Ajax's recovery. The surgery was a success. The weeks of convalescence that followed were a quiet routine of medication, gentle exercises, and shared silence. Elias rented a small cabin on the outskirts of Cascade Forks, a place with a view of the mountains. One afternoon, Martha Shaw stopped by. She told him the county was expanding its search and rescue team. They needed someone with his unique skill set, someone who knew the mountains, who could operate under pressure, who was good at finding things that were lost. "It's not a job for everyone," she'd said. "It's long hours, not much pay. But you're saving people, not fighting them." Elias had looked at Ajax, who was dozing in a patch of sunlight, his bandaged legs stretched out. He thought of the motorcycle on the cliff, a beacon of a life spent in service of others. He thought of Ben. He had come to these mountains to disappear, to become a ghost. But the mountains had given him a different path, not to forget, but to repurpose. "I'll think about it," he had told her. But he already knew the answer. Months passed. The seasons turned. Autumn painted the high slopes in hues of gold and crimson. Elias and Ajax were on a different ridge now, miles from the one where their story had begun. Ajax's leg had healed. He walked with a slight, dignified limp, a veteran's scar, a reminder of the battle won not with force, but with loyalty. Elias wore the uniform of the county SAR team now, a practical jacket with a reflective patch on the shoulder. His own field jacket, the one he had wrapped around Ajax in the storm, was folded away. He still had his pack, his watch, his quiet discipline. But something inside him had shifted. The ever-present tension in his shoulders was gone. The haunted look in his eyes had been replaced by a watchful calm. From their vantage point, they could see the valley spread out below them, a patchwork of farms and forests. In the distance, the North Cascade Dam was a concrete scar on the landscape. But now, a swarm of activity was visible around it. Cranes, trucks, the slow, steady work of reinforcement and repair. The work of making things right. A small, simple plaque now marked the spot where the motorcycle had been found. It told the story of James Corbin, surveyor, It didn't mention the lies or the greed. It just honored the truth he had protected. Elias looked at Ajax. The dog sat beside him, his gaze fixed on the horizon, his presence a solid, reassuring anchor. They were a team, partners. He had come to this wilderness to outrun the memory of a failure, the ghost of a man he couldn't save. But here, in the silence and the stone, he had been given a second chance. Not to change the past, but to honor it by making a different choice in the present. He had been asked to choose between the mission and his brother in arms, and this time, he had chosen to stay. He had chosen loyalty. The wind whispered through the pines, a sound not of loneliness, but of peace. Elias rested his hand on Ajax's head, the familiar feel of the dog's fur beneath his palm. He hadn't escaped his ghosts. He had simply learned to live with them, to let their memory guide him not toward isolation, but toward service. He was no longer running. He was home.